Few men could endure to watch for 5 minutes an animal struggling in a trap with a crushed and torn limb. I know of no sight more sorrowful than that of these unoffending animals as they are seen in the torture grip of these traps. It is scarcely possible to exaggerate the suffering thus endured from fear from acute pain, maddened by thirst, and by vain attempts to escape. Some who reflect upon this subject for the first time will wonder how such cruelty can have been permitted to continue in this age of civilization. And no doubt if men of education saw with their own eyes what takes place under their sanction, the system would have been put an end to long ago.
I've been hiking in this area of Kananaskis for over 40 years, ever since I was a kid. January of 2019, came across a whole bunch of crows and ravens off into the trees, decided to go see what was going on. Went over there, realized we're in some kind of trap line. There were snares everywhere, carcasses like you would not believe.
I've been an avid outdoorsman my entire life. Growing up, I was hiking and fishing and camping all over British Columbia. I've carried that over into adulthood. I went and got a Bachelor of Science in Wildlife Management, worked for Parks Canada briefly as a naturalist, and for the last 25 years, I've been a professional wildlife photographer. I've always had this kind of love affair with trappers, and we've got so much in common. We're out in the bush and we love that experience and that life. To me, the only disconnect was really on the killing side of things. I just didn't understand why you had to be out there killing the animals.
I come from a rural community in Quebec. I started at 5-6-year-old to follow and watch animals. At 10-year-old, I was developing my own trapping system to capture and study red squirrels and chipmunks. I was in love with wildlife, and trapping was the means that will allow me to go collect animals. I was making sure my traps will not hurt them. Eventually, the government of Alberta and the federal government approached me to head a national research program on trapping, humane trapping. That was the largest program in those days in Canada.
I'm currently right now standing in the Ghost Waiparas area. There's trap lines all around me. People may not understand that. There's trap lines all around Salmon Arm in British Columbia. There's trap lines all around Algonquin in Ontario. There's trap lines all around Yellowstone in Wyoming and Montana. It exists all over North America. The primary use of a snare is capturing an animal around the neck and choking it to death.
That's the objective, to catch it above C3, just behind the neck. If he comes in too fast, the snare will close, but he can make it to the shoulder. We have seen cougars and wolves and coyotes captured by the abdomen.
I'm familiar with traps, very familiar with, like say, from the smallest to the largest. And during the 1970s and 80s, I'm not exaggerating, I probably skinned in excess of 6,000 dead predators. Being a biologist and being a kind of a forensics guy in the kind of work I've been involved in, I could look at each and every one of these animals and see how they were caught, how they suffered, and how they died.
You realize that with killing neck snares, those snares are being used in Canada on a yearly basis to kill about 100,000 of foxes, coyotes, and wolves. And we know that they spend hours, each of them, in pain and suffering. That's a lot of suffering.
My name's Patricia McCormack, or Pat. I'm trained as an anthropologist at the University of Alberta, and I have a PhD in social cultural anthropology. There's always been a fur trade of some sort by Indigenous people. It was considered a subsistence activity, and no more important or less important than, say, hunting big game or fishing. Indigenous trapping was never for profit before the fur traders came. The subsistence component diminished somewhat once you got European intervention, and that led to a commercial fur trade, an industrial fur trade actually, with the arrival of first French traders in the 1700s, and then later with a variety of Quebecois and English fur traders, most notably the Hudson's Bay Company and the Northwest Company.
The world was a way different place in 1890 than it is today. So to say something is historically significant, therefore it gets to stay, I mean, they're tearing down statues across the continent. There was suffrage so women could vote. Women weren't working or going to post-secondary. There was segregation. We've had a pretty checkered past as people. Why can't we update trapping?
It's an industry that relies on killing animals, and for which trappers get very little money. The big returns go to the companies that acquire them and then convert them into clothing.
I study predator control, which we define as activities that are intended to reduce the negative effects of predators on people or their property. And trapping doesn't play a large role in that kind of predator control.
When we reintroduced wolves, 26 years ago, since that time, elk herds, talking statewide elk herds in Idaho, Montana, Wyoming, have all increased. There's more elk today than there was 26 years ago in these states.
If tomorrow fur trapping was to stop altogether, that won't be the end of the world. Population won't crash, they won't die of diseases, they won't eat each other because suddenly they are not being trapped. I mean, I can bring you places where the national parks are extremely large, where populations have never been trapped, and wildlife is still what it is, wildlife. They don't become bloodthirsty, they don't invade villages and kill babies like it is proposed by some trappers,
We have written wildlife policies that really don't benefit the wildlife at all. They benefit humans, and they are strictly written to benefit, in particular, trappers and hunters. Wolves and coyotes and foxes, even lynx, all these different animals that are fur bearers, all have emotions, and they sense and they feel things, and they certainly feel suffering. It's nothing against the trappers and hunters themselves. It's the regulators and government and the industries that have allowed all of this to happen.
Future generations will blame us for our failures to protect the trust. They already blame us. I see young people every semester I teach in the university, and the vast majority of those young people are confused, perplexed by the behavior of the previous generations. They don't understand us. They're frustrated by our lack of awareness and care for the environment, and they already are blaming us. It's just a matter of years until our generation is looked upon as despoilers of nature.